I'm delighted to be invited to talk to you a little bit about Mozai. Before I do, maybe just briefly introduce who I am and what I do to those of you who I don't know. I'm an intercultural trainer, consultant, keynote speaker. I'm French American and have been now based in France for over 25 years, traveling like many of you to many different countries and working with over 8 people from 80 different countries on topics such as intercultural leadership, working in a multicultural context, team building, expatriations as well, and also presentation techniques. I've done some research on my own, dedicated 2 years of my life to getting a master's in intercultural communication and researching perceptions of arrogance between Americans and French, which of course, when I present it to people from around the world, say something like, hey, well, they're both arrogant, what's there to talk about? But rather than, of course, a sterile debate on who's most arrogant, how can we be perceived as arrogant because we're seen through the cultural filters of others. So that's a little bit of my passion in terms of professionally speaking, trainer and consultant and speaker of intercultural matters. But today I'm very happy to talk to you about Mozai, which is my volunteer work that I started in 2010. And the topic for this webinar came about in our last CTAR conference in Dublin, which some of you were at, and then I was happy to see, where we were talking about, in these troubled times, as Matthew said, what can be our leadership as intercultural trainers and people, like-minded people who are dedicated in their work in some way towards that tolerance and building bridges and understanding between people. How can we, during these times, participate in helping create change locally, all the while, thinking globally, as we say. So Mozai came about, and this is very much the question that I asked myself 7 years ago when I started Mozai. So here's my Mozai story. I'd like to start with a rapid introduction to what I'd like to talk about. Pushed by Matthew, I was tickled into the idea of using funny little titles. So here they are: A Sleepy Town and a Shady Past will start us off, where I started Mozai. Mozai is born, and then some of the difficulties we had in the beginning around, just suspicion and fear and very slow starting and lack of people attending our events, etc. Then some of the hard work and the communication that we put forward and did along with the whole Mozai team, which very much paid off. And ending with chapter 5, which will be a zoom into our 7th edition of Diversity Day, which took place last May 21st. For the first time, it ended up on the International Diversity Day, which was wonderful. And over 700 people participated. So what was this path, and how can this be helpful, if at all, or interesting to some of you who are maybe thinking of doing the same, creating organizations locally to create more tolerance and understanding in your little towns, or maybe some of you have done something similar. All of this, I think, is really interesting, at least for me, to hear from you all how we can, as a community, an intercultural community, act locally and think globally. So here we go. Chapter 1, a sleepy town 20 kilometers south of Paris, which is where I live. Basically a population of about 7,200 people. You see that it's pretty much fields around, even though we're only 20 kilometers south of Paris. In fact, in the olden days, it used to be many strawberry fields forever to sort of feed Paris. It was a very agricultural land. Some of the pictures down below show you maybe how it has evolved very little in maybe about 100 years in terms of the downtown area. So a very typical small French town outside of Paris, and with, unfortunately, also a rather shady past, or a rather sad history, in that during World War II, many gypsies, dozens of gypsy families, were actually rounded up and deported to concentration camps very locally. which created a large population of gypsies. And when I say gypsies, I'm using the English term. In French, we use the word voyageurs, voyagers, which encompasses many different groups and subgroups of nomadic populations. Gypsies would be more from the south, Manouche coming from the north, Tzigan would be more from the eastern or central European countries, and etc. There are different. There is diversity within these the gypsy populations, as I think we say in English. So this shady past that I'm referring to was the sort of context of the small town that I live in with my family, and a fear and a prejudice, very, very palpable prejudice against gypsy or nomads. And even in my own family, I came to realize that there was this sort of fear. My son would say, you know, if he did something where he would get into a spiff with other children of his age, he would say, oh, they're gypsies. Their whole family will come after me if I do something. And I thought, wow, isn't this interesting? Isn't this terrible that this fear is even coming into my own little family? That there was regular speech and talk about, you know, anytime anything would happen, a car was stolen or something would happen. Oh, that's just the gypsies, you know, that's the way they are. So there was kind of a sort of total complacency around prejudice around the gypsy populations. Well, this got me thinking, how can I do my job as a sort of, you know, practitioner of pushing tolerance throughout in larger companies and big multinational companies, help them make money, but also do some good in there. That I'm pretty happy with what I do and very interested in what I do there in multinationals. But how can I do this in a more volunteer-like way? And how can we actually put to action these kind of nice, great ideals that we talk about, or that I talk about at a daily level in a very abstract, you know, sometimes removed way from these very local prejudice that I'm feeling. So the idea was, how can I create dialogue in open spaces and actually create that leadership? Well, I started asking others and talking about it. And some people said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Others said, oh, you can't do that. We can't really do that. And then I talked to a person that was somebody who I knew fairly well, but he wasn't really yet a friend. Actually, our daughters were going to school together, Christophe Ramage, who said, you know what, I've thought of doing exactly the same thing, you know, working around getting over these prejudices with respect to the gypsy populations. So we started brainstorming together, and he said, you know, I said, wouldn't it be great to create a day where we sort of put forward all the lovely aspects of different nomadic populations. I was thinking of jazz manouche, so one type with, you know, Reinhardt, and also other dance forms. I happened to be doing 4 years of flamenco dancing at that point. And so there were clearly lots of images that came to mind that I thought around dance and around music, that we could celebrate some aspects of these cultures. And then talking about it with Christophe, he was like, well, you know, we're not really very well situated. We're not gypsy ourselves. Who are we to really speak in the name of these people? But why don't we make it more large, you know, diversity? And I was like, of course, why don't we do a diversity day the way we used to do, or the way we do in the United States? And I thought, what are some of the things that are stopping us from doing that? And the reason I started thinking blocking points rather than let's go for it is because in France, there's a very different approach to diversity. And even talking about diversity can be a way of preventing people coming together in a collective space. So that was kind of the start of the thought process. But then little by little, we got over that. And there were other like-minded people like Jacques Zumstein, who was actually head of the conservatory. Actually, he's a musician. And he was really into the idea and started thinking of all these other musicians and music groups that we could add to it. And it started building and building. And then we had another wonderful participant who became our secretary, Sylvie Vasseur, who also very committed to just working in the community and building community. And so we found ourselves to be, you know, 3 or 4 people, 5 or 6, who liked the idea and wanted to do more. And so our first beginning, as you can see, is our mosaic stand at the local associations fair. And in French towns, I don't know if this is like in the towns in which you all live from other countries, but in French towns we have a sort of association fair day where all of the associations that are part of the town have a stand and people can sign up. So that was the beginning of our mosaic, which, as you see on this sign, it was very funny because people would come to our stand all absolutely sure that what we did was make mosaics. So they'd say, so where is the workshop to make mosaics? Like, oh, well, actually, it's a metaphor. It's to talk about diversity. Another person that came to our stand, as you see, there's the guitar, and that was wonderful. These are these wonderful meetings that we have in associations and through these events. A man named Jose, came up to us and he starts looking at the guitar and he says, are you selling it? Is that what are you guys doing, like a sort of thrift sale here? Because I'm looking for a new guitar. We said, no, but are you a musician? Because we're thinking of, you know, creating this diversity day and we'll need some musicians. And it turned out that he was actually a gypsy and he was part of one of our first diversity days. So wonderful, slow beginnings, very slow. We basically just jumped at anybody would come to, even within a 10-yard radius of our stand, and start talking to them about what we wanted to do. But not many people were very interested or even, you know, open to the idea, which made our beginnings rather difficult. Chapter 2, difficult beginnings. Or rather, chapter 3, difficult beginnings and suspicion and fear. Okay, so this is a bit dramatic, but clearly the beginning was difficult in that, first of all, people didn't know who we were, as I said before, so they don't, it seems to take a few years, or it was our case anyway, just hearing the name and getting the word out there would get into people's minds. Even though we were talking about it quite a bit right from the start, people were not really hearing us because they hadn't heard enough from us to a certain extent. So our first beginnings were, our first diversity day was in this picture. You can see it's taking place in the gymnasium, in our local gymnasium. Sometimes there were groups that were playing where this was actually the audience that was watching them, which means about 4 people. Our diversity day was then organized, just so that I describe it a bit more, a central stage where we have various dancing and music groups that come in and sing and hopefully have us participate as well. And then around we have stands that either are belonging to other local associations, or in the very beginning, we just had people who wanted to maybe participate and share with others something about their cultures. Or, for example, one of the stands was Portugal. One of the stands was Russia. One of the stands was France. One of the stands was, I don't remember. There were a few like that. And that's how we started out. Some of the other difficulties, though, were actually very surprising. For example, the local government was absolutely sure that we wanted to be mayor. Either I wanted to be mayor or Christopher wanted to be mayor. And that we were actually this sleeper cell, the secret sleeper cell leftist organization that was going to sort of try to take over the government, the local government, as soon as the elections came around. That created some difficulty for us. And then there were also things such as in the lower left-hand corner of the slide, you see a woman who I'm talking with, and with Christopher and Sylvie in the background, my loyal companions in this adventure. But basically, this was a fellow association. This woman represented a fellow association that was also built around diversity, and mostly around African cultures, sub-Saharan African cultures. And with even the desire to, of course, be inclusive and help each other, very quickly we realized that the funds that were out there and aid that would be given to either one of us, but not to both of us. And that was a difficult thing to deal with, because with all of our good intentions, we actually ended up getting a lot of the money that was, allotted to sort of a diversity organization. And clearly there was some resentment felt on her side, which is fairly understandable. So suspicion and fear was coming from other associations, because they didn't know what we were doing. I remember we also had a big discussion and difficulty with the elderly associations, association of the elderly in our town, because they felt that we were not being respectful in one of our events where we were trying to talk about how the elderly are treated throughout the world, and we used the word les vieux, which is old people or something. It's hard to translate. And it was really interesting, because some of them felt that was really disrespectful, and others said, no, it's great, let's use this word, and why is there negative connotations? But so a sort of suspicion as to what were our motives, what was our positioning, and what were we doing there, and how were we going to take up the space of that sort of shared associative space. Luckily, we had the stamina and a lot of this support that was, for me, the two people that I shared most with, Sidi and Christopher, but of course others that now were coming really into the picture, good friends, but people also that were coming up to us and saying, wow, this is really cool. What are you guys doing? And can we be a part of it? And we would, every time we'd have an event, we'd give more and more, get more and more names on this list. And we started a list of friends, which was interesting, because we didn't have so much a list of adhérents, how do we say, members, because we wanted to make Mozaic really free and open for everybody. So the events that we started doing more and more, not just Diversity Day, but three other events that I'll tell you about a little bit later, became opportunities to work and meet other people and get them on this list that was growing more and more, of the friends and members of the association Mozaic. And through this growing group of hardworking people, and I can assure you, we worked a lot, put in a lot of hours. We still do. We put in a lot of hours, which is part of the process. We ended up really understanding that we needed to focus on communication through all the aspects that we could do so. Christopher started a new blog, CV started a Facebook page. I had the mail list that I put out to all of the friends and members of the association. We created flyers, we created posters. Sylvie created poster workshops, which became a sort of event unto themselves. So every time we had an event, we would create these flyers. First, we send off to our German printer, who's the cheapest and best printer we found. We've got them to send us, the posters. We'd send them first the poster layout, which now is a wonderful person who is also very kind in volunteering his time. He's a graphic artist. He also happens to be the husband of one of the members of the board, Cécile. So he creates the posters. We talk about what we want on that poster. I tell him what we want on that poster. He creates the poster. We send it off to the German printer. They come back, and then we have these lovely posters that we need to put on a sort of hard cardboard. You see a little bit of the picture of CV doing what we call woman sandwich, where we walk around with the poster on our front and back so that we could just get a little bit more visual attention. And so at these poster workshops, we just create a lot of posters, usually 50 or so, that we put up all around town. We also do communication through making banners, right? A big banner. We have a lovely big banner that's made of plastic that we put money into, that we put up every time we do have an event, so that people, when they see a crowd of people, they can associate that with Mozaic. And we got really good at, or created a wonderful relationship with several journalists who really were quite supportive of what we were doing with Mozaic. And eventually they came to every single one of our events and put in a little article in the local newspaper, which is called Le Républicain. Yeah, radio stations. We also do, Sylvie contacts, and so does another very important person, Natalie Lutz. They contact radio stations and try and put announcements up at each event that we have. So through communication, we were really able to get out not only the information, but just our name and our logo, and get some visual recognition around our little town that we existed and that we were creating these free, open events for all. And which is a wonderful way to sell stuff. I mean, when you know that you're not asking for anything in return, that is very empowering, and it makes it so that I felt incredibly comfortable basically selling Mosaic left and right. Anybody I talked to, we'd go see a show, I'd go up to the, maybe the musician at the end and ask if they wanted to be a part of our fun day of Diversity Day. Of course, we don't have much money, but do you want to be a part of it? We didn't have much money, but we weren't asking for anything except people to participate. Hard work clearly helped us through the difficult times and some of the trials and tribulations that we had, including excellent bookkeeping, which is Christophe, who's the treasurer, and also his wonderful wife, who helps us, Marie-Joëlle, who is, I think, represents a lot of what is important in an association, is that everybody has their talent and they bring to it, to the association, what they want and what they can. And I think one of our strengths in this period was really creating a very relaxed atmosphere, so that anytime people were willing or able to participate and give, that was a bonus. And when they weren't, that there was absolutely a real desire, at least on my part, to never make people feel that they should feel guilty, or that they should feel in any way that badly about their not being able to participate. So putting the emphasis on the positive and recognition clearly of all of the participants' efforts. Coming back to hard work, requests for aid, another very important point that helped us through difficult times. The more money we had, the more we could actually, maybe pay a little bit, a feature artist on our Diversity Day, or a feature speaker in one of the other events. And so the request for the aid became incredibly important. And that was through our local town hall and government, who is very forthcoming and giving us money, now that they know also that we are not a sleeper cell trying to take over the government, but that we are just out to do what we say we're out to do, which is to be an association that opens dialogue and space for sharing and celebrating diversity. And of course, the last but not least of what we had to do to really pull out of a sort of slow beginning was meet and greet as many people as we could, whether it be local officials at the, we also have an association's dinner. And at first you think, well, do I really want to go to these things? And you realize very quickly, or at least I realized really quickly, that this was what it was all about, is meeting people as much as you can and talking about what you're trying to do with as much passion as you can to get people on board, and then sell your idea, basically. Local organizations also, oh my goodness, we have wonderful partnerships with other associations, like-minded associations that are creating, we have one that's called Soif de Bitume. In fact, I think I have some pictures of oops. This is Soif de Bitume, and they have incredible events, and they have a lot more money than we do too, so that we could benefit from their events that were sort of local festivals, have a stand where we would push a little bit about what we did and get more members on board, and then also get ultimately more participants for our Diversity Day, which has always been really our main attraction and our main objective, to get as many people there having fun with us as possible. Down below, you see some of what we do with these other associations too. This is called the Curtain of Words, and the words tree in the background. The background drop was a sort of collective painting done by local children in one of our Diversity Days. And the string of words here is basically just in one of these festivals, local festivals, we had our stand and we asked people, children, to put a word that they thought was particularly meaningful to them. And it's amazing how just a very simple little activity like that got many children, especially in this rather poorer area, which is not our town, but a little bit further, really a lovely response and a willingness to share and participate with joy. So that has been really nice, our partnerships with these other local associations. So hard work and communication really helped us get over these difficult beginnings. And I would say the difficult beginnings were also just lack of morale, you know, seeing people not having people coming to our events, or feeling that people were against us because they were thinking that we were this something that we were not. But through these other ways of getting things off the ground, it really paid. And I would say that last chapter is the success of Mozai through all of this hard work and a lot of sharing and fun and laughter, because it really is a process, not just an end result that needs to be aimed for, is one of the big learning lessons I learned throughout these 7 years. But in the 7 years, at the end of these 7 years, in our last Diversity Day, we had grown quite a bit. And so here you see that we have now been able to take the center square of La Ville du Bois, which is a large grassy area, and through our relationships and partnerships with a family circus, les Rudilata, who are now called the Hendricks brothers. They now rent, they basically share with us their wonderful tent, which is a real circus tent. They are, you know, circus people and a circus family from generation to generation who have traveled and been throughout the world. Their own family is made up of at least 10 different nationalities. And they are always present at our Diversity Day and helping us create this wonderful ambiance, because now we have all of the performances are under the tent, which creates just a magical atmosphere. And then around this magical circus tent, we have the stands, which you see in the lower picture, which they are empty, but of course are just about to get filled up. And we have numerous different stands, which can be, I don't know, making Brazilian bracelets in one, a solidarity association that makes jewelry for Burkina Faso, another association, our partner association called La Femme, African Families of Massy, come and they make mafé, or delicious African food or Malian food. So we have various different stands. All of the stands are filled up and very colorful. And here you have a program, the typical program, or actually the program of our last Diversity Day. I won't go into the details, but it gives you an idea that we started off, for example, with a big fanfare of percussion band that we led from that was a parade setting from the town hall to the square where the grassy lawn that we have the Diversity Day on, and we just basically drummed up a storm and passed out flyers as we were going. And it was quite a moving moment to feel that we were filling this small town with the vibes of tolerance and diversity. That's the way I saw it. I tend to see things in a very, a sort of overall view, but it was very touching. And 700 people came. It's always very difficult to know how are we actually going to count the people, because we need to know this for our statistics to show that we're actually relevant and help get us money, and just feel that we're doing something that's worthwhile. And we found this year we put a little, basically a bracelet, a paper bracelet around each person's arm, and we had counted that we had 700 bracelets, and we gave all 700 ones of those bracelets. So that was very exciting. Let's see, we can come back to the program if you'd like to have more information about that during the question period. And this is pretty much the finality of are my 5 chapters. This is a mosaic of mosaic. It's all of these pictures were taken during our last diversity day, and it was very sweetly a present to me from my son. This is a very family oriented business affair, right? Basically everybody has to participate, and my son created this application, which actually he's a software developer, whereby we could take pictures of people during the diversity day, and it would be projected up onto a larger screen as a mosaic of the diverse people that were there. And so that's a really nice addition to our diversity day this year. And in fact, if you're interested, it's something that we can let you use, and we're not sure how we're going to, give it to others, because it needs to be a little bit organized and everything, but that's definitely a possibility. I guess I'm starting to tell you a little bit more about what we'd like to do in the future, and that is to reach out, which is one of the reasons I'm very happily doing this as well, is creating partnerships and also being helpful towards others who want to create these kind of events and things to do. And so that's the end of my first part, I'd say. Just the 5 chapters of how Mozai grew from basically an idea into an association that has 4 events each year, with the the star event, Diversity Day, which is free and open to all, and brings in about at least 700 or more people to all celebrate tolerance and diversity.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. I tell you what, there's a couple of simple questions. Are you okay if I chuck them your way?
Please do. Please do.
What kind of diversity do you see in the village? Nationalities and other diversity. So that might be 2 things, actually. Just what is there organically, and who comes to these? So there may be two parts to that. Who's there actually, and also the visitors. Is there a specific diversity that you measure or observe there?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think part of there isn't much diversity at La Ville du Bois. In the little town that we started this. And I think that's part of why we felt we needed to create a diversity day, because the diversity that was there was hidden, or at least it wasn't easy to be seen, which I thought was rather sad. And also, I think, coming back to the beginnings of Mosaic, there are a lot of gypsy families that are either sedentary, living in the area, or nomadic and coming through La Ville du Bois. So that the real diversity would be more gypsy families. A lot of Portuguese live in La Ville du Bois, and quite a few Malian families. Now I'm in contact with them, so I don't know if they represent sort of a larger diversity group that's really in La Ville du Bois. It's just because of what I do with Mosaic that I get to meet these Malian families who also know each other. So it's difficult to respond to that, but there isn't much diversity.
Which is just one more question, and then we can maybe move on and save a few. Has your vision changed from the start? Did you know where you wanted to go with this, or has it been relatively organic as it's gone on?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that does lead me pretty much to some of the other things I wanted to say in terms of the mission. Yeah, shall I go on to the next slide? Because that's sort of the beginning of what I wanted to say. Some of the lessons learned were that I did have a very specific idea in the beginning that changed with my discussions with others, but basically wanting to create a diversity day was there pretty much from the start. And also this idea that it sounds maybe a little bit intellectual, but that to value both particular cultures and universal human connections. In other words, I wanted in my idea that how can I participate and actually bring locally what I do in a more business professionally level, on an international level. One of those ideas was, if we want to promote diversity, we have to also connect on a very universal level. If we're just focusing on, especially in France, talking about diversity and focusing on small groups creates a lot of tension, because there's a feeling that we are separating from each other rather than coming together for in a larger community. So right from the beginning, it became clear that we needed to do both, focus on particular cultures and recognize them, but at the same time focus on what brought us all together and what was similar about us. And that's why we focused on music, dance, food, and games. We have different events that always bring into play what is it that we share, just as much as what do we have that is different from each other. So I guess the mission didn't change, but I realized how important it was throughout to really focus on those two parts. Yeah. And also perhaps I realized, I knew it from the beginning, but I realized how important it was to actually do it in practice. And that is never make it a sort of moralistic, preachy, something that would come across as that we were trying to do some good nature thing that was going to help others. That was just, of course, that would be a lack of a total, mistake from the start. So we really were careful not to do that. And then more and more, I realized how the less I talked about tolerance, the less I talked about diversity, the more I was probably going to be successful in getting the message across.
Fascinating. And I was going to say, just how did you manage to moderate the power levels? One can imagine if you had come in and it was very, I'm in charge, do this, move that table. And there's two parts there in terms of the diversity sensitivities, but also a volunteer organization, which is famously fragile.
Yes. That's an excellent question. And I think I've grown very much in my role as president and co-founder of Mozai, because it does become clear right from the start that if this were about me, then it's not interesting to anybody. and and that's good. That's exactly, it needs to be a little bit everybody's baby for it to be successful. So I think the key to that is really recognizing, like I said before, all of the other participants' participation, and then there's always going to be, I think, a little bit of those power plays. But I think if we can always, fortunately, we have the three main actors in this association. So myself, Christopher, and Sylvie have relatively complementary and different personalities. But there are times when there is a power struggle, and that I think needs to be recognized and talked about. I think because we are all friends also, and feeling that what we're doing is more important than individually our egos, that it does help to get things going. I must say that one time a woman came to our presentation, she came to present, and she was very well known and had created her own association in Paris, and she basically participated in one of our meetings just before the event that we were going to do. It was called a film and debate event that we do. And she, when I was driving her home, said to me, really, it was very heartwarming to see the level of warmth and respect and just collaborative approach that you all had towards each other. Because that's not what I feel in my association, she said. Wow. And that was really nice to hear. It was really nice to hear, really nice to hear. And I think it has been very much an objective throughout, which brings me to maybe the last point I put on this slide's lessons learned, that associative work and what we're doing with Mozai is just as much a process as anything leading to a specific result. And I think the more I got focused on results, how many people at Diversity Day, how good are the players that are coming to play for us, how good is the movie we're going to watch, and all of those sort of very results-oriented approaches just really pulled me away from what was really meaningful. And to be stressed out in any kind of way also distracts from why we're all there. And a lot of the people who are there participating and volunteering are just there to help out. And if they're not feeling a good vibe while they're helping out, they're probably not going to be there the next year.
Yeah.
when you want to ask them to be there again. So creating a good atmosphere, I'd say, is at least as much as of the process is the end all events.
No, it seems to me there is the event, which is the circus tent, the people, the artistic displays, the manifestation. But I would, from what you've said, you're actually modelling how a committee should be working, particularly again the subculture of volunteering, and so you're only going to get people with strange agendas if it doesn't go smoothly, and if minute by minute people aren't enjoying it.
Mm, mm, yeah, absolutely.
Just moving on to that, if we can ask another one. So you've tracked the numbers with that very clever method of paper bracelets. Have you attempted? It probably isn't quantitative. The idea of, say, and this is one of the questions, measured or just assayed trust, respect, or inclusion. Have you looked at any assessment of that? It's changed from the beginning to the 7 years later.
That's an interesting question. I think that my sort of litmus test is how many people are in the meetings that we have on a regular basis to prepare these events. And I'm happy to say that we're now at a pretty solid 8 or 10 people. Whereas in the beginning we were 2 and we were 3, et cetera, et cetera. And also what is really heartwarming is when we have the diversity day. For example, that the tent that you see, actually we put that up this year, and it had to be taken down in the morning, put up in the evening, taken down the next morning, and put up in the same time. That's a lot of volunteer work that makes that happen.
Yeah.
And it's just so so nice to see the number of people. We have about 20 to 30 people that helped us do that.
Wow.
So that's also, and regularly at Diversity Day, we have a real core, of people who come to help out, and they are there in real, with a great attitude, and they come to help out. So I think that for me is a real solid metrics to see that we have trust and that good atmosphere.
So what's happening? They're happy to be present. There's the physical labour. Also, what I imagine is the year-on-year growth must be quite a nice buzz for them. And if we ask them, what do you think would say? What are they being part of? What words might they use?
Oh, that's a good point. Well, first I'd like to give some statistics and figures. We have about 350 people on the Mosaic list of friends and members. Yeah, and about 53 members. Again, there's no real reason to be a member because you get in for free at everything with or without membership. But being and we could probably sell the memberships thing probably a little bit better, but since we've made it so much not to make it a point of money, but rather inclusion, that's been an issue that we've tried to get around. But anyway, I would say that if we were to ask more and more people come up and very spontaneously say, wow, this is so important in our day and age, and we are so touched and happy that you guys exist and that you're creating this movement towards tolerance. And French people are, high context, very implicit, and to them, for many to say that is already a really powerful thing. Most of them say just very discreetly, we are so happy you exist. And these are really, it's so important that events like this take place during our times. And especially during, I didn't talk so much about this, but clearly the far right wing party in France, represented by Marine Le Pen, especially during the elections. Yeah.
Have they had an effect? Have they turned up? Have they disrupted? Has there been any sort of negative effect locally, or it's just been a sort of national newspaper that danger?
No, we have never had anybody turn up at our event trying to bring us down. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you would say that. We have been told many times, oh, be careful. Well, first it was, don't serve beer and invite the gypsies to your events. So, of course, that was incredible racism and prejudice. So we have always had some kind of alcohol form at some of the stands, and many people of diverse backgrounds, including many gypsies. We hope to have as many as we can, because diversity is the whole point.
Yeah.
And we've never had any problems in that sense. And then people who would be of the far right, who were trying to just break what we were creating, that has not happened, except for there was this one man, but he's just considered a rather crazy man, although be inclusive of everybody, right? So when he came to our diversity day, he actually made sure that his dog would go to the bathroom in the middle of the lawn. And when we were trying to get him to get off of the lawn, he said, I am doing this because I can be here and this is my place. But even somebody like that, who's just crazy and just looking to pick a fight, even he was easily taken, just gently coaxed off of the lawn. And we
I was going to say that's almost, and it comes on to another point. That's almost your measure of resilience, isn't it? I mean, there's a famous example within CETAR when a challenging person was there, and there seemed to be a sort of ripple of panic through the organization. If you have a resilient organization, a wrinkle in the plan, a tricky individual is not impossible to deal with.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up, because there was a situation that came up at the end of our diversity day, and it really also showed me how, when you kind of, like what you're saying, you've got the strength and the support around, and the ideas are there, present in the actions as well as in the talk, you can really take on those kind of difficult people. We had a group of, basically, for lack of a better term, local hoodlums, basically young kids that didn't have much to do and were looking for trouble. And they came to the end of our diversity day as we were, putting things away. And some of the children who were Malian, they actually drew on the arm. The children were very, just wanting to know, to talk and play with these younger, rather violent children. And this one boy who drew the shape of a phallic symbol on the younger child.
Oh dear.
And I was so taken aback, and I was thinking, how do I deal with this to make sure that this is a learning moment for all, and at the same time that we move on? Yeah. And so I said to him, of course, the younger child on whom it had been drawn didn't understand what it was. And I just looked at him, and the man who had done that, young man who had done that, and I said, what are you doing? Do you understand what we're here for? Do you understand what we're doing at this day? And why would you do that? And I think he was kind of taken aback that I was asking him questions and actually confronting him on it. And it ended up rather okay. I said, I just took it off, and we were able to wash it off. And and that boy sort of hung out with, the sort of rambunctious crowd, hung out in sort of a periphery of our Diversity Day cleanup. But we didn't have any more problems. And then even one of the older kids started playing with them, and they became quite friendly. So it started off really, I thought, very uncomfortable, and it ended up okay.
Well, that's an example of tolerance, isn't it? So making troubled youths or bored youths bad and escalating because the main label would be bad doesn't really help anybody. But it was that engagement, human to human, which might have softened the whole thing. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Funny, interesting. We've got interculturalists on the line. You can tell that. So someone's talking about the sort of the perceptions of the tip of the iceberg. So food, dance, and language. How could we make the Diversity Day more meaningful, a deeper understanding, the below the iceberg concepts? Is that in the dialogue? Is that in the committee? Where does that come out? Concepts of aesthetics or justice or deeper differences.
Yeah. Well, we do have at each of the stands. There's always, something on, for example, a gypsy organization called ADGV, who has all sorts of, wonderful expositions on, for example, some of the different métiers, the different jobs that different gypsies or nomad people have had, that are traditional jobs that everybody knows and doesn't even think that it's gypsies. In other words, we're all part of this whole. And so there's always some sensitivity to racism, prejudice, unfairness. That's pretty much always in one or two of the stands.
Okay.
And then we also have a quiz which pushes people to go to each of the stands and to sort of see what's the meaning behind. And the last time we had something on what is prejudice, and kids usually have these quizzes that we give out to them when they get into the diversity day, and then at the end, if they've filled out the 10 questions, they get a candy or a piece of candy or something like that, so some kind of reward. And it was so great because I would go to different stands and I would hear kids saying, "So what is prejudice to you?" And I thought, oh my goodness, that is so cool. These kids were really talking about the issues, and so with that little game, we have that going on.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
On a logistical perspective, so we've heard about 4 main events. So there's this one day. Are there 3 other discrete and different events that happen in your year?
Yes, thank you for asking. So we have, so we came to an understanding that we clearly needed to have different events that would lead up to Diversity Day to keep the energy going, and also just because it was other opportunities to open dialogue and spaces of sharing around things like music, which is the first event that we have in the sort of school year calendar. France is very attached to school year calendar. So our first event is going to be in October, and that is a jam session, a musical jam session, which in French is called un bœuf, which also means a cow. So people who are jazz oriented or musically oriented know what that means, but other people think that we're going to have a big roast or something, a big cow roast. But people are getting to understand that. And this man who is playing drums, this is Didier, the husband of Natalie Lutz, who does quite a bit and is our associate treasurer. But Didier came in to Mozai just because he just heard about this jam session, and he happens to be a very accomplished chef, and he has been making wonderful meals for us and organizing also the meals that we sell on. Now we sell meals at Diversity Day to make some money, but in the beginning we actually all made the food and gave it away.
Wonderful.
So that's our first event. So that's the jam session, where the idea, of course, is that we people who want to get up on stage and play music together, sort of the universal language, can do so. Then we have usually some kind of dance workshop before, so that we can then add the dancing. I love dancing. I don't have any musical ability in terms of a musician, but I love dancing, and a lot of people love dancing. So we dance and we jam. Next event that we have is called Saveurs and Jeux du Monde. So that's Tastes and Games of the World, rather poorly translated, but that's the idea. And that's our January event. Fantastic. Where basically, where we have games. And then we have Images et Palabres, Images and Words. So that's our third event. And these are some of the examples of things that we've done. One of the most notable ones in my mind, especially compared to with respect to what I was telling you in terms of the beginnings of Mosaic, is the picture that you see on Liberté, the poster for the film by Tony Gatliff. And we showed this film and basically did a lot of outreach and meeting gypsy communities to invite them to come in and open dialogue with people who are sedentary, as we say. They call us gajo. And we had also a historian come and talk about the different populations within the gypsy nomadic cultures, and it was wonderful. And then we had a sort of, a sort of snack time or aperitif. And I remember one woman who was a gypsy, as I was talking to somebody else, she came over and she said, "Knock, knock, knock, can I come in?" And I thought, wow, that's what it's all about. Very cool, very cool. And then our fourth, of course, event is in May or beginning of June, whereby here you see some of the, flamenco dancing in one of our Diversity Days. These kids are adorable, have become, fervent members of Mosaic. We even have like the Mosaic kids who have grown up in these events and know each other. The top picture is very important people to me as well. Aminata, who is in the middle, who lives in La Ville du Bois and who has been a member from the beginning of Mosaic, and the two women on each side of her are women who belong to AFAM, the African Association, who do a lot of good work in fairly underprivileged areas where they bring events and opportunities to talk about what it means to be bicultural in France, for example, and we've
Yeah.
worked a lot with them. And then Manuel Roy, who is a good friend and a very wonderful member of Mosaic, who's cutting the different foods that we used to give away free. And then on the last picture on the left, we have a picture of one of the circus people whose name is Oslo, like the town in Norway, who is from South Africa. So a lot of wonderful meetings of various people. And this is our wonderful little Fatimata, who's Aminata's second to last child, 3 years old, and saying, I'm ready for the next event.
Well, that brings us perfectly. Now, a couple of things. You were talking about
Yeah.
joint venture opportunities. So this is a live event now, but it'll also be turned into a film. What are you looking for? What are you hoping for? What would be the best that you could have here? Is this a similar need in a different town, and you can help, or can other people throw some resources or some ideas your way? What is your wish? What is your wish?
Yes, thank you for asking. Absolutely. I think we are at a point where we're growing and also we're systemizing, making things more systematic and process oriented so that we can actually one day even say, you know, here are the keys to the association. Now it's someone else to take up this wonderful project. And so to do that, we need, you know, people who are maybe good at creating more organization within our different, like the blog space, people Christopher is doing a wonderful job of that, but he does other things as well. So anything that we can sort of get people helping out. We have always a need for bookkeeping. If somebody wants to, you know, take that on in the coming months or years, maybe give a rest to those who have been working on that up until now. Also creating other associations that we could, you know, create partnerships with and maybe invite each other to different countries and sort of just keep the ball rolling and growing with supporting each other to create these kind of events. I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
No, you just give me an idea, or just to sort of reframe that. With a church, you get to a critical mass, and there's the new church is called the seed church, and you build, and there's a sort of hiving off of some resources. But I was thinking, so locally or even remotely, if you think of the power of social media, if there were some people with some concrete skills who could help you, it would be a wonderful
Absolutely.
training. It would be a labor for you, but it would be training and exposure in the values that you've got, which I think are critical and possibly, if not unique, then special. And then they could
Mm.
take those back to their communities. So a bit of knowledge and experience transfer.
Yes, absolutely. And if nothing else, to at least like our pages when we when we send off the
Good.
events, because that's always a wonderful thing. And also to sign up to our Mosaic friends and members, and also become a
Exactly.
member. Hey, why
Exactly.
not? It's 50 euros, 15 euros a year.
And the return on the investment is 10,000%.
Oh, tremendous.
No, that sounds fantastic. That sounds fantastic. And a tough question, a real question from our audience members. Are you available for advice, to give advice on those wanting to do something similar in a town near them? How much resource do we have, Natalie?
Yes, please do contact me. And if you know, if I can send you off to other people, I will, and I will of course share with you anything I can tell you about some of the things that you need to do or some lessons learned that we haven't talked about. And otherwise I can push you towards other people who are maybe doing more like likewise stuff.
That sounds fantastic. And just one point, I want to go through this. The success of this in sort of year seventh or the seventh edition seems to be because you survived the lull, the low attendance. What was it? Was it leadership, camaraderie? Was there something that got you through the tougher months, the tougher events? How would you describe the survival of that? What would you put it down to?
Definitely support from my family. My husband has been supportive throughout this entire project, my children and the friends and the other members of Mosaic. I think that that's something that is really important, and I think that that's some of the questions I didn't quite get to. But how do you get started? Well, what is your raison d'être? What is your starting point,
Yeah.
and who is going to help you? How can you build these partnerships on an individual level and then on an organizational level? I think that is really the key to success, because once you have some other people around you, when you're in those moments of
Yeah.
doubt, you have others that are helping you along. And just the fact that you have these people leaning on you makes it so that you really have to go along.
No, exactly. I think what you've got is a sort of peer to peer group where you're collectively contributing to the energy, but at any one time you might be a net recipient of support, love, or whatever, or you might be a donor of extra energy. And I
Mm,
think that seems to be um,
yeah.
critical in your success story.
I think
Fantastic.
also to, well, maybe just one last thing I could
Yeah.
say. So in the beginning, I thought president of an association. I've never been I've never been president. What does that mean? And I remember Christopher said, well, you know what, Ellie, it just means that you have to be the motor throughout the whole time. You just need to keep pushing in that energy,
Yeah.
and the rest will come. The actually hands and feet that you need to get things going will come, but you need to push that energy constantly and keep it flowing. And so that's what I've tried to do, and that's what seems to work.
Very yes, putting the momentum in and clarity. I,
Yeah.
I I know you professionally, and we stated this before. This is your passion community project as opposed to your suited and booted day job. But
Yes.
it seems to be that is this. You have focus. You are driven. You move forward. You keep that going, and that it probably to have that as at least one member of the team having that is critical to it not just fading
Hmm.
away.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I think those definitely are needed in an association, especially such as this. And we're a whole team, and that's really what's great about
No,
it.
exactly. So thank you very much. Our time here is just about up, but can I thank you for an inspiring story, which is necessary, apposite, and appropriate. And you've generously shared the highs and the lows. Been very open, honest, vulnerable, and told the truth about the challenges. And I think people, the listeners here and myself as well, just think, wow, there is optimism there. There is resilience. There is the response to the crazy in the world, which is totally constructive. It is tolerant. It is something that we can change from a theory into practice. So that gives us hope, and that gives us something to aim at. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you all for listening.
Great stuff. Well done. So you can get in touch with Natalie on behalf of the Intercultural Training Channel. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. But this has been a powerful evening. So go and spread the word, and we will see this crop up in villages all around the world. Natalie, thanks very much one more time.
Vive la diversité.
Absolutely. Vive la différence. Okay. Take it easy. See you.
Goodbye. Goodbye.